You are hovering on the edge of sleep when your whole body suddenly shudders as if you just missed a step. The jolt is so abrupt that for a second, it can feel like your nervous system just failed. Today, we are testing the best evidence behind 5 common body glitches and marking exactly where science still says we do not know. These events are brief and difficult to capture, so the honest map includes both measured findings and clearly labeled hypotheses. Sleep starts, formerly called hypnic jerks, are common movements during the transition into sleep and are usually benign. By themselves, they do not mean brain damage. Their full mechanism is still not settled. Let us systematically audit these anomalies to separate harmless biological static from actual red flag medical warnings. A useful way to picture sleep onset is as a handoff, not a single on-off switch. As awareness fades, wake-promoting and sleep-promoting systems change their firing patterns across the brain. During that unstable transition, motor control can briefly escape its usual waking pattern. The result is a sudden involuntary contraction, sometimes in one limb, sometimes across much of the body. It tends to arrive at the exact moment you are drifting out of wakefulness. A sleep start can arrive with a flash, a sound, or the unmistakable sensation of falling. That is why the body jolt and the imagined drop can feel like one perfectly synchronized event. But what happens when this electrical crosstalk occurs inside your visual pathway instead of your limbs? We will unpack that visual mystery soon, but first, we must examine the physical triggers of the hypnic jerk. Sleep loss, stress, and stimulants such as caffeine are commonly reported alongside more noticeable sleep starts. They may keep the transition into sleep less stable, but the research does not reduce every jerk to one trigger. However, the presence of these jerks does not prove you have an underlying movement disorder. Sleep starts are recognized as physiological myoclonus, involuntary movements that can occur in otherwise healthy people. If the movements become frequent enough to disrupt sleep or arrive with other new symptoms, that is a different clinical question. For most people, a sleep start is a brief transition event, not evidence that the nervous system is collapsing. This brings us to our first core explanatory concept. The body is not a perfect digital machine, but an analog system prone to transition noise. Now, let us shift our attention from whole body jolts to a highly localized, maddeningly persistent twitch in your eyelid. You are sitting at your desk when your lower eyelid begins to pulse rapidly and uncontrollably. This fine, rippling contraction is known clinically as eyelid myokymia. Unlike a whole-body sleep start, it usually stays confined to one eyelid, most often the lower one. Movement comes from tiny contractions in the orbicularis oculi, the muscle that closes your eyelid. Its exact cause is not fully understood, which is less satisfying than the internet's favorite one-line explanations. Electrophysiology instead shows individual motor units firing in rhythmic or semi-rhythmic bursts. Soon we will meet another tiny temporary signal, this time perceived inside one ear. First, why does the eyelid seem to start fluttering during the worst possible week? The movement is often more obvious to the person feeling it than to anyone watching. Fatigue, stress, anxiety, and caffeine are repeatedly associated with these episodes. Heavy screen time is often blamed, but the evidence is not strong enough to call it the universal cause. So the responsible answer is not a dramatic adrenaline story. It is that several everyday stressors can coincide with an incompletely understood twitch. Isolated eyelid myokymia usually has a good prognosis and often resolves on its own. Separately, a long-term study of 121 patients diagnosed with benign fasciculations found no progression to symptomatic motor neuron disease in that cohort. That is reassuring evidence, but it is not a permission slip to diagnose every new twitch from a video. For isolated eyelid myokymia, conservative advice centers on rest and reducing triggers such as excess caffeine. If it persists, spreads across the face, forces the eye shut, or comes with drooping or swelling, seek professional evaluation. Now, let us resolve our earlier open loop about what happens when this electrical crosstalk occurs inside your visual pathway. Imagine stepping out of a dim building into bright sunlight, only to instantly explode into a fit of sneezing. This bizarre phenomenon is known as the photic sneeze reflex, or more humorously, achoo syndrome. Population estimates vary, but one large survey cited by the EEG researchers found the reflex in about 1 person out of 4. Family clustering suggests a congenital component, but a simple inheritance pattern has not been nailed down. The strongest direct clue comes from an EEG experiment, but it was small. 10 photic sneezers and 10 controls. In that experiment, photic sneezers showed a more excitable visual cortex when exposed to visual stimulation. Stronger nose prickling also tracked activity in the insula and secondary somatosensory cortex. What the experiment did not record was electricity physically leaking from the optic nerve into the trigeminal nerve. That optic trigeminal crosstalk story is one proposed explanation, not a cable short scientists have watched happen. What the EEG did capture was a visual response recruiting body sensation regions more strongly in photic sneezers. That co-activation offers a cleaner explanation for why bright light can feel like a prickling nose. Once the sensation crosses the threshold, the ordinary sneeze program does the rest. So this is sensory overlap at the network level, not proof that two nearby nerves are literally sparking into each other. However, this study does not prove that photic sneezing is a disease or a disadvantage. It is usually harmless, appears early in life, and may run in families, yet its inheritance is still not fully resolved. It serves as a stark reminder that our neural wiring is often bundled together like messy computer cables. If sudden glare triggers you, blocking the glare can reduce the trigger, but never stare toward the sun to test the reflex. Next, let us resolve our second open loop and explore the mysterious phantom ring that suddenly fills your ear. You are sitting in total silence when a sudden, high-pitched tone rings loudly in one ear, lasting only a few seconds. Researchers call this sudden brief unilateral tapering tinnitus, or SBUT. In one survey of 62 adults, 76% remembered experiencing at least one of these brief tones. Because it starts without warning and fades quickly, it can feel like your hearing system is failing in real time. But the study did not prove a hidden self-tuning reset inside the ear. The mechanism remains uncertain. What the researchers could measure was the event's pattern, brief, one-sided, and usually tapering away. In a separate diary group of 74 adults, the average rate was about 1.2 episodes per month. Right ear events appeared almost twice as often as left ear events in that sample. The estimated pitches varied widely, which argues against one universal internal tone. 3/4 of the recorded episodes lasted 25 seconds or less, and about 1 in 4 arrived with a feeling of earfulness, an association, not an explanation of cause. Then there is the hiccup, a real reflex with an origin story that may reach far back into vertebrate evolution. Clinically called singultus, a hiccup begins with a sudden involuntary inspiratory spasm. Flex arc involving the phrenic and vagus nerves helps coordinate the movement. Acute hiccups can follow everyday triggers such as a large meal or a carbonated drink, while persistent hiccups are a different medical problem. The inspiratory movement is followed by closure of the glottis, the opening between the vocal cords. That abrupt closure produces the sharp sound we recognize as a hic. In 2003, researchers proposed that this pattern may be an archaic motor program inherited from distant vertebrate ancestors. Their comparison was gill ventilation in animals such as frogs that use more than one way to breathe. Those lower vertebrate breathing patterns share features with hiccups, including inspiratory activity paired with glottal closure. The idea is that an ancient rhythm-generating circuit could persist because related circuits were reused for useful breathing and suckling functions. It is a clever evolutionary model, not a fossil record of a hiccup circuit, and not a proven fact. Put these 5 experiences together and one pattern appears. A brief signal can feel much more dangerous than it is. Research on symptom amplification shows that attention and threatening interpretations can increase the distress attached to a real sensation. That does not make the sensation fake. It means the meaning your brain assigns to it can change how alarming it feels. The useful distinction is not glitch versus no glitch. It is brief and isolated versus persistent, worsening, spreading, or paired with other symptoms. A single sleep start, a short-lived eyelid flutter, or a fleeting ear tone often resolves without treatment. The question changes when movements persist or spread, or when tinnitus remains one-sided and comes with hearing difficulty. New weakness, loss of coordination, drooping, swelling, persistent hearing changes, or severe dizziness are reasons to seek professional care. A clinician can evaluate the pattern in context. A search result and this video cannot. So no, your body is not a perfect digital machine, and most of these brief events are not proof that it is breaking. It is a living control system, and living control systems can produce noise at transitions without every signal having a single neat explanation. Subscribe to Oddly Evident for more strange human behaviors, separated into what evidence shows, what scientists suspect, and what remains unknown.